Hey boys and girls, here's your read aloud for homework for this week. The New England Colonies and Native Americans by National Geographic. And this was adapted by News ELA on September 10th of this year. Okay? An overview. The first English settlers and Native Americans attempted to create a relationship based on trade and a common interest in spirituality. Ooh, I'm going to circle that word spirituality because that word sounds kind of funny to me. I see the word spiritual in it, so I think it might have to do with religion, but I'm not sure. Disease and other problems soon caused it to fall apart, and eventually the two sides found themselves at war. I'm going to put a connection here because I have lived in a country that went to war. Complex history. One of America's earliest and most enduring legends. Enduring, that's a kind of funny word. I think it looks like endure, but I'm not quite sure. Is the story of Thanksgiving. In 1621, Pilgrims sat down with the local Wampanoag Indians in the New Plymouth colony to celebrate the first successful harvest. It makes for a great story. Cultures coming together and sharing the bounty of the land that would eventually become America. I'm going to go ahead and put a second connection here. This is a connection that's unique, special to me. I've visited Plymouth. It was really cool. If you ever get the chance to go, you totally should. But for most of you, that's probably not going to be your connection. So you're going to need to make a connection to either some Wampanoag Indians that you've heard about, maybe in social studies. You can write about a time that you harvested, maybe that you grew something with your family. Or Thanksgiving would be a good place to make a connection, or you can ask a question there. However, the history of the colonies and the local Native American tribes is far more complex. It is an interwoven narrative of trade, cooperation, and intense conflict. Finding common ground. When the first English settlers began to arrive in New England in the 1600s, there were already about 60,000 Native Americans living there. At first, the two sides had conflicts over territory. Still, colonists were able to build thriving colonies with their help. I'm going to put a connection here because we've read that Native Americans came before Europeans, and we read that in our Of Thee We Sing text, so that would be a good connection to another text. At first, the two sides had conflicts over territory. I'm sorry, I've already read that. Let's go to this next paragraph. Trade was one of the first bridges between New England colonists and local Native American populations. The colonists needed to build infrastructure. Ooh, that's a weird word. Maybe that's like buildings? Let me try that. The colonists needed to build buildings. That makes sense. And relationships in order to thrive in the New World. The Native Americans were interested in building alliances. Only after 5 years, Plymouth Colony was no longer financially dependent on England due to the economy it had built alongside the native Massachusetts tribes. Both sides benefited from trade and bartering. The Native Americans provided skins, hides, food, knowledge, and other crucial materials and supplies. The settlers traded beads and other types of currency in exchange. Ideas were traded alongside physical goods. Wampum, a type of currency, sometimes carried religious significance as well. The first Bible printed in the New World was actually in Algonquin. The communication between the colonists and Native Americans was not just political or practical, but also spiritual. I'm going to put a connection here because I've talked with people who believe in a different religion. Which sounds like what was happening with the Algonquins and the Wampanoag and the settlers. Puritan Christianity was the main religion of the New England colonies. As the colonies grew and changed, some of the colonists began to move away from Puritanism. Their attitudes about the Native Americans also evolved. changed, became different. A famous example of this is Roger Williams, who rebelled against Puritanism and founded the colony of Rhode Island. Williams held the unorthodox view, the not orthodox, not normal view, that colonists had no right to occupy land without purchasing it from Native American tribes. I'm going to ask a question here. Where did Williams get this idea? That seems like a great idea and something that's fair, but I'm just wondering where he came up with that. Over time, however, relations between the colonies and local tribes deteriorated. I'm not sure what that word means, but it sounds like a negative word, so I'm going to put a negative sign above it. Some of the problems were unintentionally caused by the colonists, like smallpox and other diseases they brought over from England. The local Native American populations had no immunity, and epidemics killed many. Some colonial leaders believed that the destruction of the tribes was an act of God to support the colonists' right for land. They used it as a way to convert the natives to Christianity, making them into praying Indians and moving them to praying towns or reservations. The First Indian War. Colonist-Native American relations worsened after the course of the 17th century, resulting in a bloody conflict known as the First Indian War, or King Philip's War. I'm going to ask a question here. Why was it called King Philip's War? Why? What does King Philip have to do with this? In 1675, the government of the Plymouth colony in Massachusetts executed 3 members of the Wampanoag tribe. The Wampanoag leader, Philip, also known as Metacom, retaliated by attacking the settlements with a fighting force made up of Wampanoags and other tribes. Some tribes, including the Mohegans and Mohawks, fought against them on the side of the English colonists. Oh, that explains it. So if King Philip is actually an Indian, he's a Native American, even though his name doesn't really sound like it. So maybe that's his European name. So why was this called King Philip's War? So sometimes it helps when you ask a question to keep reading. The war lasted 14 months, ending in late 1676, and a treaty was signed in April 1678. With such heavy casualties on both sides, this war is considered one of the deadliest conflicts in American history. The Native American population lost thousands of people to war, illness, slavery, and many fled the area. More than 600 colonists died, and dozens of settlements were destroyed. The history of New England colonies reflects the two sides of history of America as a whole. Native and immigrant cultures came together to create the modern United States, but also clashed in devastating conflict. I'm going to write a connection here, actually, thinking about our current story. So, immigration can cause conflict, right? And we're learning about some of those as we read. So here's your questions. Which 2 of the following sentences from the article include central ideas of the article? 1. The first English settlers and Native Americans attempted to create a relationship based on trade and a common interest in spirituality. 2. Disease and other problems soon caused it to fall apart, and eventually the two sides found themselves at war. 3. One of America's earliest and most enduring legends is the story of Thanksgiving. 4. Williams held the unorthodox view that the colonists had no right to occupy land without purchasing it from Native American tribes. A. Sentence 1 and 2. B. Sentence 1 and 4. C. Sentence 2 and 3. D. Sentence 3 and 4. Question 2. Which statement would be most important to include in a summary of the article? A. The reason why the government of Plymouth Colony executed 3 members of the Wampanoag tribe is unclear. B. The First Indian War is also known as King Philip's War because the Wampanoag chief was named Philip. C. The Mohegan and Mohawk tribes fought alongside the colonists in the First Indian War. D. The First Indian War is considered one of the deadliest conflicts in American history. Question 3. Which section from the article is best supported by image 2? So make sure that you flip back and find image 2. So this says image 1. So this is probably image 2 right here. When the first English settlers began to arrive in New England in the 1600s, there were already about 60,000 Native Americans living there. At first, the two sides had conflicts over territory. B. The Native Americans were interested in building alliances. After only 5 years, Plymouth Colony was no longer financially dependent on England due to the economy it had built alongside the native Massachusetts tribes. C. Over time, however, relations between the colonies and the local tribes deteriorated. Some of the problems were unintentionally caused by the colonists, like smallpox and other diseases they brought over from England. D. The Wampanoag leader Philip, also known as Metacom, retaliated by attacking the settlements with a fighting force made up of Wampanoags and other tribes. 4. Which conclusion is best supported by both image 3 and the information in the section Finding Common Ground? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, I'm going to look at image 3, and I'm going to find this section Finding Common Ground, and I'm going to make sure that I reread it so that then I can answer this question. Which conclusion is best supported by both image 3 and the information in the section Finding Common Ground? A. Native Americans were open to new ideas about religion, such as Puritan Christianity. B. Native Americans were forced to move onto reservations to keep diseases like smallpox isolated. C. Native Americans and colonists were able to negotiate with one another for the resources they needed. D. Native Americans applauded the ideas of Roger Williams and helped him set up Rhode Island.